A few years back, a friend of mine who grows microgreens commercially handed me a pea shoot straight off one of his trays, and I remember standing there in his garage thinking, how have I been gardening for over a decade and never grown these? I mean, I had raised beds full of tomatoes, peppers, squash, the whole spread, but I had somehow convinced myself that microgreens were one of those trendy restaurant things that did not really belong in a home garden. That was honestly one of the dumber assumptions I've made in close to 15 years of growing food. Because here's the thing most people miss about microgreens: they are not some exotic, fussy crop that requires special equipment or years of experience. They are just regular seeds. The same seeds you would plant in your garden, grown densely in a shallow tray and harvested young. And when I say young, I mean 7 to 10 days for most varieties. That is it. From dry seed to something you can eat in about a week, right there on your kitchen counter. No outdoor space needed, no fancy grow lights, no greenhouse. In this video, I'm going to walk you through my entire process for growing microgreens indoors, step by step, the way I wish someone had laid it out for me when I first started. We are going to cover everything from picking the right seeds and setting up your trays to the watering technique that makes or breaks your success, all the way through to harvest and storage. And the bonus tip I have for you at the end is a $2 solution that eliminates the single biggest problem new microgreen growers run into. I stumbled onto it almost by accident, and the science behind why it works is genuinely fascinating. So stick around for that one. I got into microgreens because I wanted something I could grow year-round, regardless of what the weather was doing outside. Here in my zone, winters can shut down the outdoor garden for months, and I was tired of that gap. But what really pulled me in, what made my science teacher brain light up, was learning that these tiny little greens can pack anywhere from 4 to 40 times the nutrient concentration of their fully mature counterparts. Researchers at the University of Maryland tested 25 different microgreen varieties and found that across the board, the nutrient density was dramatically higher in the seedling stage. Once I read that study, I had to understand why. And that curiosity is basically what led to the setup I use today. The process is far simpler than most people expect, and once you see how it works, you will wonder why you did not start sooner. So the first thing you need to sort out is what seeds to actually grow. And this is where I want to save you from the mistake I made. When I first tried microgreens, I went online and ordered about a dozen different specialty varieties because they sounded interesting. Half of them were slow germinators, a couple had really specific temperature requirements, and I ended up with a confusing mess of trays that all needed different things at different times. What I should have done, and what I would tell anyone starting out, is pick 1 or 2 beginner-friendly varieties and learn the process with those before you branch out. Radish is probably the single best starter microgreen out there. The seeds are large enough that they are easy to handle, they germinate fast, often within 2 days, and they grow vigorously with very little fuss. You will have harvestable greens in 7 to 8 days, and they have this wonderful peppery bite that makes you feel like you actually grew something with real flavor. Sunflower is another fantastic choice. Nice and chunky seed, very forgiving. And the shoots have a mild, almost nutty taste. Pea shoots are a personal favorite of mine because they are substantial enough to actually cook with, not just use as a garnish. And if you want variety without the hassle, a basic salad or brassica mix, something with a blend of lettuces, mustards, and maybe some arugula gives you a beautiful tray with almost no extra effort. You will want to buy in bulk rather than in those little garden packets because you're using a lot more seed per tray than you would in a garden row. Places like True Leaf Market or Everwild Farms sell by the ounce or by the pound. And when you do the math, you can grow a full tray of salad mix for well under $1. Compare that to what a little clamshell of microgreens costs at the grocery store, usually $4 to $6 for a couple of ounces, and you start to see why this is worth doing at home. Once I had my seeds figured out, the next question was what to grow them in, and this is where a little bit of understanding goes a long way. The setup I use is dead simple, and it is the same basic approach that commercial microgreen growers use, just scaled down. You need 2 shallow trays, the standard 10 by 20 inch nursery flats that you can find at any garden centre for $1 or $2 each. One tray has drainage holes in the bottom and the other one does not. The tray with holes nests inside the solid one, and that two-tray system is the key to the whole operation because it lets you water from the bottom. I will explain why that matters so much in a minute, but trust me on this one, it is probably the single most important detail in the entire process. For soil, you want a fine-grained potting mix, and I mean genuinely fine. No big chunks of bark, no wood chips, no perlite nuggets the size of peas. These tiny seeds need smooth, even contact with the soil surface in order to germinate uniformly, and large particles create uneven terrain where seeds clump into crevices while other areas stay bare. I learned this the hard way with my second or third tray, where I used a regular garden centre potting mix with all sorts of woody bits in it, and the germination looked like a moth-eaten sweater. A basic seed starting mix works beautifully, or you can use straight coconut coir if you prefer something inert. Now, when you fill your tray, and this is a small detail that makes a surprisingly big difference, you want to leave about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch of space between the soil surface and the top rim of the tray. The reason is purely practical. When you come through with scissors to harvest, that little bit of recessed space means you are cutting cleanly through stems without dragging your blade through dirt or pulling up roots. It keeps your harvest clean, which means you do not have to wash your greens. And honestly, not having to wash microgreens is one of the small pleasures of growing them at home. Once your soil is in, I like to take a second tray and gently press it down on top to create a smooth, lightly compacted surface. You're not trying to pack it down hard, just enough to eliminate any bumps or ridges so your seeds will distribute evenly. Smooth it back out after you press and you're ready to sow. And this is where it gets really interesting because how you sow depends on the size of the seed. And getting the density right is the difference between a lush, beautiful tray and a disappointing one. For small seeds like radish, turnips, or a salad mix, you are just scattering them across the surface, corner to corner, as evenly as you can manage. No need to bury them. No need to be surgical about it. Just a nice, even sprinkle. I usually start from one corner and work my way across in a back and forth pattern. And then I go back and fill in any thin spots, especially the corners, because you will naturally tend to undersow the edges. For larger seeds like peas and sunflowers, there is an extra step that makes a real difference. And it is one I skipped my first time around because I was impatient. You want to soak them in plain water for about 8 to 12 hours before you sow. The science behind this is actually pretty simple. These bigger seeds have a thick, hard seed coat, and soaking softens that coat enough for water to penetrate and kickstart the germination process. If you skip the soak and just scatter them dry onto your tray, you will get spotty, uneven germination because some seeds will take up moisture from the soil faster than others. After soaking, drain them well and spread them out on your prepared tray, packed in more tightly than you would ever plant them in a garden. Once your seeds are down, give the surface a light mist with a spray bottle, just enough to wet the tops and help them stick to the soil. For the bottom water, pour about 2 cups of water into your solid outer tray before you nest the seeded tray inside it. The water wicks up through the drainage holes and moistens the soil from underneath. And this is critical because it means the surface of your soil and the tops of your seeds stay relatively dry. That matters enormously for preventing mold, which is hands down the #1 killer of microgreen trays for new growers. Now comes the part that requires a little patience, which I will admit was hard for me the first time. Once your seeds are sown and misted, cover the tray to create a dark, slightly pressurized environment that mimics being buried underground. I just flip another tray upside down on top, and if you want to go a step further, set a small weight on top, even just a book. The darkness matters because most seeds germinate best without light, and the gentle weight forces the emerging shoots to push against resistance, which encourages strong root development before they start reaching upward. Over the next 2 to 3 days, you can peek once a day, and you should start to see tiny white roots pushing into the soil and pale yellowish shoots lifting the cover tray. Those yellow shoots are completely normal. They are yellow because they have not been exposed to light yet, so they have not started producing chlorophyll. Think of it like a potato sprout in a dark pantry. Same idea. Once those shoots are about a ½ inch to an inch tall, and you can feel them pushing the cover upward. It is time for the next phase. If you're finding this helpful, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. I put out new videos every week where I break down the science behind growing better food at home. It is free, and it means you will not miss the next one. All right, let us keep going. This is my favorite part of the whole process. The moment you take that cover off and introduce your little pale shoots to light for the first time. You can almost watch them respond. Within a few hours, those yellowish leaves start turning green as the chloroplasts kick into gear and begin producing chlorophyll. And by the next morning, the transformation is remarkable. Now, for lighting, you have two perfectly good options, and which one you choose depends on your kitchen setup. If you have a south-facing window that gets at least 6 hours of decent light, that will work fine for most varieties. Just rotate your tray a quarter turn each day so the shoots do not all lean in one direction chasing the sun. If your window situation is not ideal, or if you want more consistent results, a simple LED shop light or a clamp-style grow light works beautifully. You do not need anything expensive or powerful here. I use a basic $20 LED clamp light from the hardware store, positioned about 4 to 6 inches above the top of my tray, and it does the job perfectly. The key is proximity. The closer the light source is to your greens, the stockier and healthier they will grow. When the light is too far away, the seedlings stretch and reach for it, getting tall and spindly and eventually flopping over under their own weight. That stretching is called etiolation, and it is one of the most common issues new growers run into. As for timing, I run my light for about 14 to 16 hours a day using a simple outlet timer that costs maybe $5. You could go as low as 12 hours on and 12 off. But I have found that the extra light produces noticeably thicker, greener shoots. From this point forward, your one daily task is watering. And I cannot stress enough that you want to keep watering from the bottom. Lift your inner tray out, pour water into the solid outer tray, maybe a cup or so, and set the inner tray back in to wick it up. How often you need to do this depends on your kitchen environment, but a good rule of thumb is to lift the tray once a day and judge by weight. A well-hydrated tray feels noticeably heavier than a dry one, and after a couple of days you will develop an instinct for it. If it feels light, add water. If it still feels substantial, leave it alone. The reason I am so insistent about bottom watering is that keeping the surface and the leaf canopy dry is your single best defense against mold and fungal problems. Top watering creates a damp layer right where all those tightly packed seedlings meet the soil, which is exactly the warm, moist environment that mold loves. You do not need any fertilizer during this stage, and this surprised me at first, but the science is straightforward. Each seed contains all the stored energy the plant needs to get through its first couple of weeks of life. For the short growth cycle of microgreens, the seed itself is the fuel tank. Your kitchen counter at normal room temperature, somewhere around 65 to 75 degrees, is ideal. Most varieties are ready to harvest somewhere between day 7 and day 10, and you will know it is time by 2 visual cues. The shoots should be about 2 to 4 inches tall, depending on the variety, and you want to see the first set of true leaves starting to emerge above the initial seed leaves. Those seed leaves, the cotyledons, are rounded and simple, and the true leaves will look more like a miniature version of the mature plant. Once you see those coming in, grab a clean pair of scissors or a sharp knife and cut about an inch above the soil line. Work across the tray in sections, and here is a little habit I picked up that I really like. Instead of harvesting the entire tray at once, I only cut what I need for that meal or that day, and I leave the rest growing. Those remaining shoots are still alive and still gaining nutrition from the seed, so they are as fresh as food can possibly be until the moment you cut them. When you are ready to store your harvest, just tuck the cut greens into a loosely closed container or a bag in your fridge crisper. They will hold nicely for 3 to 5 days, though honestly, once you taste them fresh, you will probably use them up faster than that. Now, let me share some of the things that can go wrong because I have dealt with all of them, and understanding why they happen makes the fixes obvious. The most common disaster, and I mean this is the one that ends more first-time trays than anything else, is mold. I lost my first 2 trays to it before I figured out what I was doing. Wrong. You will see it as a white, spidery fuzz right at the soil surface, usually where the seedling stems are the most crowded. It thrives in stagnant, humid conditions, And 9 times out of 10, the cause is top watering or poor airflow. Once I switched to exclusively bottom watering, the problem almost disappeared entirely. The second issue I ran into was patchy, uneven germination. I spent a while blaming the seeds before I realized the problem was my soil prep. The surface was not smooth enough, and my seed distribution was too heavy in the center and too light in the corners. Tamping evenly and scattering seeds all the way to the edges fixed it completely. The third thing you might see is seedlings that grow tall, thin, and pale, then start flopping over like they have lost the will to live. That is etiolation, and it simply means they are not getting enough light, or the light is too far away. Move your light closer, or move the tray to a brighter window, and the next batch will be dramatically different. And if your seeds just do not seem to germinate at all, check 2 things. First, how old is the seed? Older seed loses viability, and if it has been sitting in a garage for 3 years, that might be your answer. Second, for those larger seeds like peas and sunflowers, did you soak them first? I once skipped the soak on a sunflower tray because I was in a hurry, and the germination rate was maybe 30%. The same seed soaked overnight came in at well over 90. That 10-hour soak is not optional for big seeds. It is essential. Now, here is the bonus tip I promised you. And this is something I discovered almost by accident about 4 years ago that completely changed my success rate with microgreens. I was losing a tray here and there to mold even after I'd switched to bottom watering, and I could not figure out why. Then one afternoon I set up a small battery-powered clip fan on my kitchen shelf, just a cheap one, maybe $2, pointed at my trays on the lowest setting. I was not even thinking about the microgreens. I just wanted some air moving in that corner. Within a couple of weeks, I realized I had not lost a single tray since the fan went up. The science behind this is something called thigmomorphogenesis, which is a $10 word that means plants change how they grow in response to mechanical stimulation, like wind. That gentle air movement does 2 things. First, it disrupts the thin layer of stagnant, humid air that sits right on top of your soil surface, which is exactly the microclimate that mold spores need to take hold. Second, and this is the part I find fascinating, the gentle stress of the air movement actually triggers the seedlings to build thicker cell walls and sturdier stems. It is the same reason outdoor plants are almost always stockier and tougher than greenhouse plants. So for the price of a $2 clip fan, you get dramatically less mold and noticeably sturdier greens. I keep one running on low whenever I have trays going now. That is everything I have for you today. Gardening is one of those things where the more you learn, the more you realize there is to discover. If you found this helpful, hit that subscribe button so you do not miss the next one. Happy gardening, and I will see you in the next video.